All right, let's dive into something that always gets people talking.
Oh, yeah.
Marrying an older woman.
It's a fascinating one.
We're going deep this time, looking at it from a Christian perspective,
Interesting.
with this podcast called The Sunshine Inside.
Okay, yeah, I know this one. They're all about faith and wisdom and growth.
Exactly. And they tackle the question head on. Is marrying an older woman a good idea?
I'm curious to see where they land on that.
Me too. Now, you might be wondering how this deep dive applies to you, Reb.
Right.
Well, whether you're thinking about marriage yourself, just fascinated by relationships in general, or interested in how faith plays into life choices.
Yeah.
This deep dive has something for everyone.
No doubt. It'll definitely get you thinking. And they start by laying a biblical foundation, turning to Genesis 2.15.
Where God gives Adam responsibility for the Garden of Eden.
Before Eve even shows up.
That's the interesting part. The host uses this to highlight responsibility,
Okay.
not age, as being key in God's design for marriage.
Interesting. So they're saying God doesn't tell Adam to wait till he's a certain age before taking on these responsibilities.
Exactly. It makes you think about what truly prepares someone for marriage.
That's a good point. And it raises the question, does this interpretation line up with other biblical perspectives on marriage?
Like?
Well, like in Ephesians 5.22, where wives are called to submit to their husbands. How do you interpret that passage in a marriage where the wife is older, maybe even more experienced?
Ooh, that adds another layer to it.
Yeah.
The podcast seems to be saying a man needs to be spiritually ready to lead and care for his wife,
Yeah.
regardless of his age.
Right.
But what does spiritual maturity really look like? Is it wisdom, emotional intelligence, a deep understanding of faith? What do you think?
All of those things and more, maybe. It's like having a strong moral compass, making good decisions, having the emotional depth to handle marriage's ups and downs.
Totally. And speaking of ups and downs,
Uh-huh.
the podcast doesn't shy away from the challenges of marrying an older woman. They mention potential cultural differences between generations.
No, I can see that. Like, imagine family gatherings where one spouse's pop culture references just go right over the other one's head.
Exactly. Or different opinions on parenting based on when they grew up.
Those are real everyday things that age gap couples might face.
Absolutely. But the podcast also talks about the strengths, like how an older wife's life experience can be a huge asset.
Definitely. Think about the wisdom she brings to decisions, conflict resolution, even just handling life's curveballs.
And on the flip side, a younger husband might bring fresh perspectives and energy.
Right.
He could push his wife to try new things, think in new ways.
It's a beautiful exchange, you know? Wisdom and youthful enthusiasm.
I love that. It's recognizing that everyone, no matter their age, brings something unique to the table.
For sure.
And when those differences are appreciated, they can make the partnership even stronger.
Absolutely. They become the foundation. Now, the podcast also talks about practical principles for making this kind of marriage work.
Okay, like what?
They emphasize humility on both sides.
Interesting.
And they specifically reference Colossians 3.18, which talks about wives submitting to their husbands.
That's a verse that often sparks debate, especially today.
Yeah, it does. But the podcast seems to be looking at it through a lens of respect and understanding,
Okay.
highlighting clear communication and compromise.
It brings up a really important point. How do those traditional gender roles work when the woman is older and maybe has more life experience?
Right. Does her experience somehow change the idea of submission? Or is it about finding that balance where both partners feel respected?
It's complex, for sure.
Mm.
It seems like the podcast doesn't pretend to have all the answers,
Right.
but they encourage couples to have honest discussions about expectations and how they see those roles playing out.
It's like they're saying, hey, there's no one right way to do this. Each couple needs to figure out what works for them while still being grounded in faith and respect.
Exactly. It's about finding what works within that framework. And this brings us to what I found most compelling.
What's that?
The idea that seeking God's will should be at the top of the list for any relationship.
They really hit that point hard, don't they?
They do. They say when both partners are focused on God's plan, age becomes less important.
Yeah, it shifts the focus to shared values, purpose, that feeling that their relationship is guided by something bigger.
Exactly. Now, this brings up a question for me. How do you actually figure out what God's will is in a relationship? Is it prayer? Intuition? Talking to religious leaders? What do you think?
That's a great question. I think it could be all of those things, honestly. The podcast doesn't give a step-by-step guide,
Right.
but it feels like they're suggesting it's an ongoing process of seeking, listening, and trusting.
That makes sense. And maybe it also means accepting that God's plan might not always be what we want or what society expects.
Yeah, maybe it pushes us out of our comfort zones, challenges our assumptions, and opens us up to new possibilities.
That's what makes this whole exploration so interesting. It goes beyond the surface and makes us think about the big questions
Oh,
about love, faith, and how complex relationships really are.
for sure. It definitely gets you thinking.
That's what we're here for, right?
Exactly, to get people thinking.
It's almost like they want us to look past just societal norms
Right.
and see these relationships through faith, through how God designed marriage.
Yeah, I like that. And speaking of application,
Mm-hmm.
the podcast gives some solid advice for couples.
Like what?
Well, they really emphasize praying together regularly.
Makes sense.
It's about staying grounded in your faith as a couple, building that spiritual connection.
It's like weaving prayer into your everyday life together.
Exactly. And then, of course, open communication.
That's huge in any relationship, but even more so with an age gap, I'd imagine.
Oh, definitely. Different life experiences mean different viewpoints.
For sure.
So being able to talk about those openly and honestly, that's key.
It's about making that space where both partners feel heard, understood, even when they disagree. The podcast even suggests those regular check-in conversations where couples talk about what's working, what's not, any challenges they're facing.
That's a great idea. And to round it all out, they talk about nurturing mutual respect,
Okay.
celebrating each other's unique qualities, recognizing the value each partner brings,
No matter their age?
no matter their age. I really like how they emphasize showing appreciation for each other.
Oh, yeah.
Little gestures, words of affirmation, really listening to each other.
It all builds that foundation of respect.
It's about remembering respect isn't just a feeling.
Yeah.
It's something you choose every day in how you treat your partner.
That's a good point. Now, this podcast is coming from a Christian perspective,
Right.
but it made me think about how these principles might work for relationships outside of religion.
Interesting. You mean those universal truths about love, respect, responsibility.
Exactly. The stuff that goes beyond any one belief system.
I think the core principles they talked about, they resonate with everyone. Like that emphasis on spiritual maturity. That could easily be emotional intelligence, self-awareness.
Exactly. And those are important no matter what you believe. It's being able to understand yourself, empathize with your partner, handle challenges maturely.
Couldn't agree more. And that idea of seeking God's guidance,
Yeah.
it's almost like a broader call to find shared purpose in your relationship.
Could be a shared passion, some core values, a vision for the future you're building together.
It's like the podcast gives us this framework.
The framework.
Yeah, that can be adapted for different relationships. The language might change, but the ideas underneath stay relevant.
It shows how religious beliefs can shape things.
For sure.
But there are also those basic human needs, those values that are universal.
Like wanting love, connection, belonging.
That's something everyone wants.
Absolutely. And it's why this deep dive is so valuable.
I agree.
It makes us think about our own beliefs and values, how they affect how we approach love and commitment.
We're looking beyond just societal norms here and considering those deeper principles that make relationships strong.
Whether they're based on faith or just that shared desire for love.
So as we wrap this up, I'm curious what stuck with you most from this deep dive.
What was insightful? What really got you thinking?
Was it how they interpreted those marriage roles? The focus on spiritual maturity?
Mm.
Maybe the challenge to find a deeper purpose in your relationship.
Or maybe it was seeing how these principles can work for anyone, religious or not.
Whatever it was, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Keep the conversation going.
Yeah, relationships are complex.
There's always more to learn, more to explore,
Keep questioning, keep seeking,
and most importantly,
keep loving.
it's amazing how we went from biblical stuff to practical tips and now to these universal truths about relationships.
It shows you, at the end of the day, we're all looking for the same things, right?
Connection, love, belonging. That's something everyone gets.
Absolutely. No matter who you are or what you believe. Now, the podcast gave us a framework through that Christian lens, but it sparked a thought for me. We talked about maturity, communication, seeking guidance.
Yeah.
What about passion, especially in a relationship with an age gap?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
They focused on the foundation, sure, but passion, that excitement, that attraction,
It's important.
it is. We often think of passion as this young, fiery thing.
Right. That spontaneous energy.
But can passion grow up alongside a relationship? Especially when there's that age difference.
It makes you think about passion and wisdom working together.
Right. Can a relationship survive on just one or the other? Or do you need both?
That's the question, isn't it?
Imagine one partner bringing that excitement for new things and the other bringing wisdom from their experiences.
I like that.
They learn and grow from each other.
Keep the spark alive while navigating life with a mix of enthusiasm and, well, seasoned insight.
That's beautiful. It means those age gaps don't have to be about one person leading the other,
Right. It becomes this shared experience.
where each person brings their strengths and creates something truly special.
I love that. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this.
What do you mean?
It's not about fitting into some societal box or following a set of rules.
Okay.
It's about understanding love, respect, responsibility, yes, passion too. And then finding how to weave those things into a relationship that's authentically yours.
Your own unique blend.
Exactly. Have those open conversations with your partner. Figure out your values. Be willing to grow.
Both as individuals and together.
Right. Who knows? Maybe that leads to an even deeper connection.
A love that goes beyond any limitations.
That's the goal, right? To find that kind of love. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. We explored this one podcast, this one perspective,
Right.
but it opened up this bigger conversation about relationships.
How complex they are, how beautiful.
We just scratched the surface here.
There's always more to learn.
What speaks to you? How do you see passion and wisdom working together in your own life? Keep diving deep, keep exploring.
And keep loving. That's the most important part.